Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Nancy Walters. I'm the Executive Director of the La Jolla Community Center, and I'm very excited to have you all here. Thank you for joining us for Wednesday Connect. As you may know, and some of you are regulars, Wednesday Connect is a new series where we just get together and we learn, engage, and connect with each other and walk away with hopefully learning something new. So just to tell you a little bit about Jackie, give me one sec. So we're very happy and fortunate to have Jackie Seidman join us today. She is passionate about gardening. The thrill comes from the feeling of optimism every time she puts a plant or seed into the ground. For almost 25 years, Jackie ran an extremely project for organic vegetable gardening in addition to consulting with homeowners. Jackie became a San Diego Master Gardener in 2001 and treasures that affiliation. She serves on the board of the San Diego chapter of the Association of Professional Landscape Designers. Jackie's area of expertise include fruit and vegetable gardens, Waterwise plants, conceptual landscape design, using the watershed approach to sustainable landscaping. Please help me welcome Jacqueline Seidman.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, good. Well, good morning, everybody. I wish I could talk to you in person and see your happy faces. But during these difficult times, I guess Zoom webinars are the best way to meet and learn. I'm happy to talk to you today about my favorite subject, which is gardens, and to talk to so many people without wearing a face mask. That's really a nice thing for me right now. I like to tell new clients that gardens are a lot like little boys and puppies, and if you leave them alone long enough, they're going to get into trouble. The topic today, judging from what you said, I could have talked a lot about vegetable gardening, but I'm going to be talking about, is it time to refresh your garden, or when is it time? And if you think it's time, I'm going to help you with some tips and tricks as to how to do that. Refreshing your garden is a lot like getting a haircut. Your hair looks fine until one day you wake up and then you have to get your hair cut today. How do you know when it's time to refresh your garden? So I'm going to give you an overview. I'm going to help you through the process. Where to begin, how to evaluate a site, how to rethink what you have and what you might like to add, what resources are available to you, some basic elements of design, how to select plants, and then some before and after photos of gardens that I've designed with an explanation of what the vision was. In 2012, I refreshed or redesigned my brand. I went from JRS Design Group to Jackie and the Beanstalk. And today, wherever I go, people are always saying to me, wow, I love that name. I'm always going to remember it. So it was good to do. I want to talk about what's the concept of refresh. We refresh ourselves every day. We bathe, we refresh our homes, we throw out the garbage, we change linens, and we refresh our hair, or we would look like this. Speaking of hair, my husband cut my hair 2 days ago, and you want to talk about a scary experience? Wow, that was a lot of, I was like, don't take too much, don't take too much. So if we didn't brush our teeth, we would look like this. And why are we okay when our gardens look like this? Or this? Or this? Sometimes we have a slope on our garden, and they're one of the most difficult areas to maintain. If you drive around San Diego County, very often this is what you're going to see. Sometimes we don't prune often enough, and we get overgrown shrubs. These shrubs have not been pruned properly or often enough, and they really can no longer be salvaged. In San Diego, the rule of thumb is you refresh your garden every 7 to 10 years. And I'm going to show you this picture again later so you could see what I did in this landscape design. Another important factor is that gardens are living, breathing organisms. They're like children. You wouldn't neglect your children for 6 months. They would suffer and get sick. Well, that's the same with our plants. They have needs. They need water, they need sun or shade, they need rich soil to survive, and they really can't do that without our care. They become susceptible to insects, fungal and bacterial diseases, and nutrient deficiencies. So the next thing we'll talk about is how to evaluate your garden. You need to be objective. It's no time for sentimentality. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the book, The Art of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, but her basic principle was get rid of whatever does not bring you joy. And I recommend that same theory when you want to refresh your garden. What factors do I consider in my evaluation? The first one is irrigation. Lack of water. This earth is dry. It will not accept water readily anymore. The soil is called hydrophobic. What happens is this causes stress in plants, weaknesses, diseases, and my guess is that no one has tested the sprinkler. There's a sprinkler right here in the front right-hand corner of the bed, and my guess is no one has tested that sprinkler in a very long time. Sometimes the problem is too much water, which causes rotting. These plants are not going to be able to be salvaged. They just need to be removed. Drainage. Drainage is the second most important factor you need to think about when you want to refresh your garden. If it's not corrected, you're throwing money away on plants. This could be a simple fix. It might just be a clogged drain with some tree roots in it. It could be broken. Sometimes there is no drainage and it just needs to be added. Next consideration is maintenance. So often the maintenance it's just poor maintenance. You are not married to your maintenance service. Many times I hear, oh, I love Mr. Green Jeans. He's been working here for 25 years. And this is what I see. What is this maintenance company doing here every week? What I find very often are two scenarios. People pay a lot of money for poor, lackadaisical service, kind of a mow and blow kind of guy, or you're not paying enough money and you're expecting too much. So if you're paying too little and you're expecting someone to be there for 3 or 4 hours and they're only giving you an hour, it's never really going to look good. The next thing to think about is tree root competition. As our trees and shrubs mature, it gets harder and harder to find plants that will grow under. These are very large ficus trees and almost nothing will grow under them. The best thing to do here would be to add some mulch or some pots with some colorful flowering plants. Do not plan for a colorful English garden under these trees. You will, even if they survive for a short period, they are not going to survive for a long time. The next issue to think about is pruning. This obviously shows a lack of pruning skills for a very long time. And all these pictures are real pictures that I took driving around San Diego County. Here we have a tree, beautiful tree in the front entry. That tree, I cannot walk under that tree without ducking. I am 5'4" tall. So somebody needs to elevate the canopy of that tree. Here is a path to the front door, but it's very unwelcoming. You don't feel comfortable walking up those pavers. The bushes are encroaching into the walkway, and these plants cannot be salvaged. They need to be replaced. Pruning shrubs into shapes that defy nature. Sometimes trees and shrubs can be pruned into interesting shapes. This one reminds me of a popsicle. And if you like that type of look, a very formal, actually French look, that's fine. But this tree can no longer be salvaged and made to look like a natural tree. So if you don't like that look, you need to remove it. Now, if you want to see the award-winning pruning, this guy knows how to prune. This front entry is an overgrown mess. You can't find your way to the front door. There's a brick pathway. It's not that all of these plants are bad plants, just some need to be removed, some need to be reorganized. Another thing to consider is hardscape. In this photo, there are just too many colors and textures. There's not any one that's wrong, there are just too many of them. So pick what you like and simplify, and I think you can make any one of those elements work. Sometimes your hardscapes become a safety issue. a trip hazard. This walkway either needs to be fixed and relaid or replaced. It's a surface made from urbanite. Urbanite is where you take an existing patio or driveway and you chop it up into little pieces, and you can make wonderful walls or pathways out of them, but they do need to be laid correctly. Sometimes you just want to add a pop of color. So this is a focal point planting bed in a garden that didn't have any plants, and the homeowner put in some low-growing plants. There's an antique sculpture of a little girl looking down. And what I did is I just added a pop of color. And now the little girl, excuse me, looks like she's bending down to smell the flowers. Well, if all else fails, you can install synthetic lawn and buy a shop vac. Excuse me. So the next step in the process is to rethink. What is your vision? What is the vision that you have moving forward? What elements might you like to add? Shine a positive light on what you have that you like, and then look at what you have that you don't like. Take photos because the camera sees everything. So when you look at a photo, sometimes you'll see things in it that you don't really see. You've kind of become dull to what it is really existing in your garden. And then it's time to think about what elements would you like to add. Would you like a shaded area? You could have an outdoor room. This is a rather elaborate, large one. It has a seating area and a dining area. You could add a TV, a barbecue. Some people add fire features. Perhaps you just want a shaded area with a large umbrella. Some of the new large umbrellas are amazing. They're big cantilever umbrellas that are out of the way. They come in 11, 15 feet. They're great. And this shaded area does not need to be attached to your house. Sometimes it's nice to sit in the garden and look back at the house. Do you want a fire feature? This fire feature was added in a meadow garden adjacent to a swimming pool, and it's a lovely destination to walk to and also to look back at the house. Sometimes you want to add a piece of artwork that you have as a focal point. It could be whimsical, it could be an antique. There's something for everyone. I am passionate about edibles. That has been my focal point in my gardening for many years. I used to grow everything we ate. And I do try to add edibles in every project, even if it's just a lemon tree in a pot. It can be anything from vegetables in the ground. In the first picture, there are cobblestones delineating the beds. In the middle one, vegetables are just planted into a traditional landscape, so you don't have to have raised beds, such as the third photo. So there are many ways to add edibles. Bocce courts, bocce's become very popular. This is a large regulation court. You don't need that. You can play bocce on any basically DG surface. You can play a form of bocce on some grass, but it's always a lot of fun. People always say afterward they're so glad they added it. Do you want to add a water feature? Water features attract pollinators, birds. They make soothing sounds. It's nice to sit and listen and relax. Maybe you want a swimming pool. This is a large jacuzzi. The dark tile is the jacuzzi, and it overflows into a small wading pool for children on the right. So the adults can sit around and the kids can splash and everybody is happy. Sometimes you have views to block, and there are many ways to accomplish this. In this case, we've added a screening hedge. This is newly planted. And in 6 months to a year, it will completely block out the homes that are to the right of it. You can add a decorative panel. These range in price from $50 to $60, all the way up to a couple of $1,000s per panel for custom panels. The patterns are pretty much infinite. In this case, it was used to block the view of the street in a private sitting area at the front of the home. Fences. Fences do not always have to be standard wood fences. They're beautiful ways you can create fencing In this case, it was done for screening and beauty versus privacy. Add a vertical element. You can leave it unplanted, which is on the left, and then on the right, the metal tutors were planted with sweet peas, and in the spring, that will be a burst of color and fragrance. Pots are very important details to add to the garden. When you have a lot of hardscape, you can use pots for focal points. The main principle of pots is a thriller, a filler, and a stiller. So you try to have a tall element, which on the left is a kangaroo paw. The middle ground is the Gerbera daisies, and then I put in some colorful plants to cascade. Again, this is newly planted, and those flowers will start cascading over that pot at the entry. The second photo is succulents. There's a tall green phormium, which got lopped off the photo, but that would be the thriller. And then there are lots of different colored aeoniums in the middle ground. And then the pink flower spilling over is a pink senecio. You can embellish a quiet corner by adding, in this case, we added 2 plants and 2 pots and changed the look of this corner at the entry of a garden. Don't be afraid to add color. Sometimes a pop of color in a pot adds a lot of interest, and you don't necessarily have to plant it. Picking the right pots is important. These pots are too large for the planting bed. Even if you put plants in here, they are really never going to work. So selecting the right size and shape of container is very important. For the same area, I created an artwork with the pots and kept the plants pretty simple. Succulents, this area has a lot of shade, so I picked succulents that will be able to stand some shade. And then we added a colorful ceramic totem on the left for a pop of color. Find a place to sit in your garden. I can't stress that enough. It's a place to relax, to read, enjoy the sights, the fragrance, the flowers of what you've created in your garden. Retaining walls. Sometimes you have a difficult slope, and nothing, as I said earlier, it's very hard to maintain shrubs on a long-term basis on slopes. But by adding retaining walls, you create levels of flat planting, and it's much easier to garden, and it's much easier to be successful. So this was a difficult slope. It's actually 2 retaining walls. The second retaining wall is here on the top left corner. And so this garden had fruit trees in the middle section and about 50 feet of roses going around that circular retaining wall. Another thing to consider is how many people will be using the space. So this area was designed for 2 people with no children. There's a dining table, lounge chairs, but if you're 6 people on a regular basis, this space would not work the way it's designed. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about what resources I use when I begin a design. The first thing I do is homework. You need to do homework as well before you begin. Well, I use online resources and books. I did not go into the books. There's so many books. I'm going to give you my email at the end if you want some tips on books. I'm more than happy to share. I have an extensive library, so I didn't even want to go there. But online, my 2 favorite places to start are House by creating idea books, or Pinterest by creating boards. So you can define your idea book or board by refining it into elements such as a fire feature, a pathway, drought-tolerant plants, or you can lump it all into Jackie's garden and just put everything all into one board or idea book. Or if you're not comfortable with the internet, take a camera, walk around your neighborhood, and take pictures of what you like and what you don't like. And what you don't like is really just as important as what you like, because it helps you refine and focus on what direction you want to go in your own garden. Another thing to do is to Google. You can do Google's, so this photo is a Google search I did for Waterwise landscape. You can do it by topic for design, such as shade gardens, edible gardens. You can search for plants. I searched for drought tolerant plants and I clicked on images, and this is what I got. The most important criteria is to include the USDA zone when you're searching. We are in zone 10, or if you're, let's use La Jolla as an example, that would be Sunset Western Garden Book Zone 24, and you will find plants that will thrive in the area that you live. So you can search for vines for the shade, succulents, soft succulents, etc. One of the best tools that I use is San Marcos Growers. It's sanmarcosgrowers.com. They are the industry standard of information for everybody designing gardens. The list in the blue box is standard for every plant. It discusses if a plant is evergreen, what's the color of the bloom, the height and width of the plant. I cannot stress how important that piece of information is. The exposure as well. Is it a plant that likes sun, shade, or sun and shade? What the water needs are, and the hardiness. So if you're in La Jolla, you don't really have to worry about hardiness, but in other parts of our community, some areas do get frost. There is a book that I'd like to talk to you about. It was written by John Beaudry. It's an excellent book if you'd like to take on trying to design your own garden. He breaks the elements, he breaks it down to, couldn't be simpler to understand. He just did a great job. So I highly recommend, if you want to do this on your own, I would start with that book. So now we want to talk about design. So I've done my homework and I've organized my thoughts. And now I would like to share some of the things I think about as I'm ready to create a design. Budget. Every project begins and ends with the budget. Even though you don't think so, it does. Be realistic. Think about, how much do I want to invest in my garden at this time? And I say invest because it is an investment. It does increase your property value and it makes your home more saleable if and when the time comes for that. Don't just start buying elements. You need to have a plan. Walk around your garden, immerse yourself in it. Stand in different locations. Plan a destination in the garden where you look back and look at the house. You need to think about sun and shade. Where is the sun and where is the shade? You're going to need different plants for those areas. Do I have a view to block? Do I want to create an area that's a focal point? The plants in the design come last. So what is my process? My process in an existing landscape is to clean out what I don't want first. So I've now in this garden removed all the plants that for whatever reason we weren't going to use. This is the same bed. You can see we've left some plants that were growing in the ground, and then we're starting to place plants in the area that we've removed them. One of the things you need to do is to measure. So you need to have the tools that I use are a measuring wheel, a laser measure, a 100-foot tape, and a 30-foot tape. Measuring is critical to a good plan, and it's good to make a plan before you start to plant. And you don't have to be a schooled designer with a degree. You can draw it on graph paper. I always use 1/8 inch equals 1 foot if possible, which means that for every 1 inch on your drawing, it equals 8 feet in your landscape. And you can buy graph paper that's already at that size. If your garden is really small, you can use 1/4 inch, but I always use the 1/8 inch. If for some reason you don't want to, or you feel you can't measure, there are services available in San Diego that will measure and create a site plan for you. And if you contact me at the end of this, I will give you people to contact to do that. So then you draw a sketch of the area. It should be as close to scale as possible. I usually show the existing plants with an X So I know that it's not a plant I'm going to be buying. And then each dot represents what size the plant will be at maturity. So if your plant is going to be an 8-foot plant at maturity, you would show it on the 1/8 scale at 1 inch. And then I usually color in my dots because that way I can see where my colors are, if I've made any mistakes and lumped too many yellow or pink plants together. And then I show green if a plant is a predominantly green plant. So this is that area that I showed you where I removed the plants earlier. We did the design, which you just saw, and this is what it looked like planted. Another thing to think about in design is a focal point. So there's a large fire feature at the end of this runway. If that were not there, it would just be a very large grassy area, which is fine, but this created a focal point for a beautiful view. I did not do this design. I was just called in after it was built to help the homeowner with plants. I think one of the most important things in design is that your landscape should marry with your architecture. And I feel in this case, it did not. There's a lot of very contemporary elements. If you look back here, everything is very gray and concrete, and I don't feel it marries at all with the very California style home. And I feel that it actually disregards the architecture of this home. Here, I think, is a good example of architecture with marrying with the plants. This house has somewhat of a Southwest feel with the color, the stone that they use, the wood arbor, and I think that the plants marry very well. The watershed approach to sustainable landscape has become the mantra of APLD, the Association of Professional Landscape Designers. The concept is to keep as much water on the property instead of sending it into the storm sewers. And we do that through many different ways, but the most common one is rainwater capture. I try to recommend incorporating rainwater in every project I do if it's possible. In this particular garden, it's hard to see, but there's a rain chain coming down from the gutter into this was the client's Asian pot. The water flows into that pot and overflows into a bioswale that leads along the property and then empties into a basin that's filled with rocks as well, but it has a pop-up drain so that if we have a very large rain event, the water doesn't overflow and then run into the street. Mulch. I can't stress how important it is to mulch your property. It's very important in part of creating a sustainable landscape. It nurtures the soil by breaking down and adding essential microbes that promote healthy plant growth. It retains water, so it will reduce your water use, and it's aesthetically pleasing. So here's a garden where the mulch was just being added, and I think you can see the difference in how well the plants in the foreground look compared to the plants in the background. Another thing you can do is use permeable pavers. The gravel in between these pavers allows the water to stay on the property versus being diverted into drains. Here is another example. Sometimes we use poured in place concrete with pebbles in between instead of a solid walkway. This allows the water to permeate into the ground. Same as on in this picture. So now we have some idea of our design, and shopping for plants would be the next part of the project, and it should be the fun part. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I select plants. One of the things I'd like you to consider there are many plants in our nurseries that are poisonous. They're poisonous to people, they're poisonous to dogs. So the best thing to do, you can Google search for poisonous plants. The one on the left you see all over, it's Euphorbia tiracali, sticks on fire. The sap of that plant is very caustic. It causes terrible, terrible skin rashes. It can cause blindness. People put this plant in the worst places, where kids play, where dogs play. It can make your dog blind. The plant on the right is also a very common plant. It's a cycad, sago palm. These orange seeds are 85% fatal to dogs if they eat them. So you just need to know what to plant in your garden. And you would be surprised if you did a Google search of plants poisonous to dogs, how many plants on your property are already poisonous to dogs. The next thing to think about before you put your plants in the ground is called a hydrozone. A hydrozone is where you put all the plants in one irrigation zone that like the same amount of water. So you don't put a high water use plant next to a low water use plant. This is a drought tolerant perennial border with edibles added. You can see some artichokes. These artichokes are going to be left to flower, and they have a beautiful purple thistle flower. Now I want to talk about plant combinations. So in this corner of a garden, it's pretty much all green. And the only thing that we've used to vary the and bring interest is the texture and the color of the greens. If you would like a quiet look, sometimes all green or shades of green or even green with some variegation works very well, or plants that have smaller flowers. Here I've used plants that have similar colors but different textures. So they have the corally red, pink, yellow, and green, and they marry very well together. Gray-green plants are very often underused in the garden, and the good thing about them is they thrive in hot, sunny locations where sometimes other plants do not. So one of the things to think about when you're pulling plants together is combining color and texture and height. So these plants are pretty much where they're going to be, and you don't have to constantly prune them. And there's 3 different texture of leaves, and they go well together. In this photo, this is just a jumble, a chaos of plants. Your eye doesn't know where to look. There's no rhyme or reason, and there's no repetition. Repetition is a very important concept in the garden. Repetition creates drama. Here's a repetition of using only one plant, and it creates a very strong linear element of walking down that pathway. Here's another use of only one plant. This is Agave attenuata, which is a great plant, but I believe it's clearly overdone with no purpose. Here we have repetition of 5 plants. It's good use of color and texture. So these plants all have very, very small leaves, and if they were all the same color green, this bed would have no interest. But because of the different colors of the foliage, it creates interest here. And this is a very natural look using repetition. Here we have repetition with a more formal look. You have the same plants on either side of the walkway, but the boxwood hedge gives it an air of formality. Another thing to think about is espaliering plants. An espalier is where you take a plant and you attach it to a wall or a fence. And it's a good use of plants when there's limited room. This is an apricot tree espaliered to a stucco wall. This apricot tree couldn't exist there because this bed is only 4 feet wide. So when you espalier, you can still get a lot of fruit in a small area. But if you do that for a fruit tree, plant very shallow rooted annuals in front of it so that it's not competing with the root zone. Here's another use of an untraditional way to espalier plants. This is a Grevillea long john. And this plant wants to be 12 feet by 12 feet, but if you have a limited space, but you want some height, you can take this plant and espalier it onto this lattice fence, and you will have something that fills up the space. Don't be a plopper. A plopper is the word I use for people that go to the nursery and find plants that they love and just plop it in the ground. You need to read the tag. The tag has very, very important information for you. It tells you what zone it's good for. It tells you if it's a full sun or a shade plant. It tells you what height and width it's going to be. These pieces of information should not be overlooked. It is going to make or break your design. This is a great plant in the wrong place. Obviously, this person did not read the tag. No amount of pruning is going to make this a good choice. So now that I've talked to you about what to think about in the refreshing and designing, I'm going to show you some before and after photos of gardens that, that I've designed. Here's a property called in to do the front entryway. The homeowner wanted to keep the front walkway, but I didn't like the little white bricks, the little white blocks in the front. They reminded me of teeth that were holding up the dirt. And we decided we were going to keep the trees and the large aloe in the foreground. So we wanted to keep it quiet. It's pretty much all greens, mostly succulents and grasses. This is a large corner lot where the homeowner was spending $1,000 or more a year on annuals, replanting this 2 or 3 times as the annuals died. And she just wanted some perennials and bushes to give her some color throughout the year. Come on. There we go. So this is what it looked like just planted with the little baby shrubs. You unfortunately see a lot of pine needles that drop for some reason. So those obviously got taken away. And this is what it looked like about 6 months later. Very little maintenance. And this look is pretty much what she sees all year round. Here's the entry to a homeowner association gates, front gate. You can see an irrigation problem. For some reason, they picked all white alyssum. And I happened to like the bougainvillea that was cascading over the wall, so I used that. And I added some colorful plants in the foreground, lots of different textures. You can't see it yet, but up against the white wall, there's a plant that I use for a hedge that will, so you won't really be able to see the white wall, the bottom white wall after probably about a year. So this is a front garden where the homeowner wanted to take away the lawn. The palm trees had to remain because they were part of the city, but there was a overgrown hedge at the front. There's a very nice patio, a porch to sit on. You can see the top of the bench. And there was a large overgrown juniper on the right. And this is what it looked like after we designed it. We wanted to keep the brick walkway. And again, this is just after planting. A lot of these plants will all fill in and kind of just barely hug the walkway. We used some grasses, some kangaroo paws, some flowering shrubs, and an arbutus marina, which is one of my favorite trees. It's called a strawberry tree. Here's the retaining walls I showed you earlier, where I showed you the rose garden. This is a different section of it before it got planted. And here I used some Sally Holmes roses, climbing roses, with some pelargoniums and some purple flowering nepeta, which is a catmint in front. This home, the homeowner came from the East Coast and wanted to create a large perennial garden where something was blooming all year. The home is kind of looks like it came out of Provence, so that was the theme I went with. And almost everything was removed from these front planting beds, except the roses on the left and the daylilies on the right. When the homeowner came out after we removed all the plants, they almost had a heart attack, but then once we planted, they were very happy. So this has become a riot of color all year. Sometimes in the winter, it needs a few additions because some of the things get cut back, but this is pretty much what it looks like all the time. Here's that area that I showed you earlier where the shrubs were all overgrown, and I said we really had to do something to fix it. And this is what it looked like after I planted it. And up against the house, I don't know if you can see them, but there are lots of birds of paradise. All of those were harvested from a different area of the garden, so we didn't waste them. And then this was a challenge because this home had a very long and narrow front bed. It's only 11 feet wide and very long. And then it had a bare wall here in the front. And then the windows in the front in this section were 5 feet high. And the windows in the back section near the black car were 12 feet high. And in the center here is an alcove that houses a 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot air conditioner that at some point might have to come out. So we had to make accommodations for that. And then from the left corner down to that black car was a pretty steep slope. So we wanted to make sure that the water didn't just rush down. And this is what it looked like after. I used a lot of succulents and colorful plants. I used very large podocarpus to disguise some of those very tall walls. This is a leucadendron that will grow just to 5 feet and will fill up under the window when it matures. I added some gravel. We talked about permeable paving. We added some gravel so that the water starts to become put into the ground versus running down the slope. We added a fountain, which is welcoming at the front entry, and then talk about espaliers. We used a espalier plant of the Grewia occidentalis, which is the lavender starflower that eventually can fill up this wall. So in summary, we talked about evaluating, and I hope I gave you some valuable tools, useful tools. Although after you go through all the steps we talked about today, you still need to see what is possible within your budget. I can't stress enough to, number one, think of irrigation, and number two, drainage. If you don't address those issues, I would not spend a lot of money on the rest of your project. You may find that after reviewing all of these things, your goals and dreams may change, and be open to that because you're looking at it with a different eye. Try to create a scale drawing as best you can or hire someone to do that, and don't plot because it's not a recipe for success, but one for failure. And when you shop for plants, shop for color, texture, and create wonderful combinations. I take plants in the nursery and I move them around in the nursery. I very often have 6, 8, 10 plants lumped together to see how do they look together. I read the tags. If I put together plants that are sun lovers with shade lovers, I make accommodations. I do the same thing at Evergreen or Briggs Nursery, which are large drive-around nurseries. I put the plants in my car. I drive them around, I put them together, and then I'm always respectful to put them back where they belong. Here are some photo credits to be fair to all the people who helped with some of the photos I've used. I thank you very, very much for your time and listening to me today. Here's my email and my phone number, so feel free to contact me at any time if you have questions along the way. I'm happy to help you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and if you have any questions, fire away.
Thank you so much, Jackie. That was extremely helpful and interesting, and I think we all learned a lot. Thank you for sharing all that, so many years of knowledge with us. So appreciate that very much. If anyone has a question, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask away. Does anyone have a question for Jackie?
I do.
Rosina, go ahead.
Yes. Are kangaroo paws difficult to keep alive? Do they have a lifespan? Mine are not doing well. Do you have any idea why?
Well, it could be, no, they don't have a short lifespan. If you're fertilizing them with any type of fertilizer that has phosphorus in the equation, they don't like it. So when you buy fertilizers, there's 3 numbers, the N, the P, and the K. So the number in the middle is the phosphorus, the P. It should have no phosphorus. So I tend to use worm castings for my kangaroo paws because there's no phosphorus.
Thank you. Oh, another thing,
Yeah,
do they have a season?
yes, there's a bloom time for kangaroo paws. Like
And the-
pretty much all perennials, they will have a bloom time, and then when the bloom is done, you would cut off the spent blooms, and then they'll bloom again the following year.
Is there a nursery that you would recommend in the San Diego area?
Oh, wow. Yes, there are lots of nurseries. There's a Green Gardens nursery in PB. There's Anderson La Costa on La Costa Avenue. Those are what I consider the two gem, very, very mama and papa hand-holding kind of help. Walter Anderson is another large nursery that has excellent help. You don't get quite the same hand-holding as you do with the other two. Then Briggs Nursery up in Vista is one of the larger nurseries where you can actually drive around and see lots of plants. Waterwise Botanicals, which is up in Bonsall. I love Waterwise Botanicals because the owner, Tom Jesh, has created lush landscapes using the plants that he sells. And you can actually see like how big do they get, what do they look like in a landscape before you plant them. And they're also very knowledgeable. If you ask for help at the front desk, they're very, very knowledgeable. But for some of you, I know it's probably 45 minutes to an hour away.
Thank you.
Jackie, how did you get into your field? And did you have to study? I mean, I think there are a number of people that are interested in this field, and maybe you could tell us about that. And the other quick question I would have is, how do you know that you better put some fertilizer on a particular plant to save it?
Okay, so I don't generally recommend fertilizing plants to save them. What my recommendation is you feed the soil and that feeds the plants. So if you have a sick or struggling plant, I sometimes will resort to using something like Miracle Grow for a one-time basis or even two-time basis, but it's not a steady diet in any of the gardens because it's basically like giving sugar to kids. The more sugar you give them, the more sugar they crave, and it's the same thing with using those types of products. I use what I would call soil amendments, and if you have good soil, then you will have healthy plants. And as far as learning to be a landscape designer, there are several good programs in San Diego: Miracosta College, Cuyamaca College, and Southwest College are the three places you can go. I have a mix of, I do not have a degree from any one of those places, but I have taken many courses there. And then I have 40 plus years of experience in gardening, from growing everything I ate in vegetables to large perennial beds. I got a lot of training becoming a master gardener in 2001 and doing 12 hours of continuing education. I've learned a lot by being a member of APLD. It's an amazing support group. We share knowledge on a regular basis. So I don't know if that helps you.
That's good. What is the association? Again, you said you gave initials. What is that association? And do you become a member and you go to monthly meetings or that sort of thing?
Yes, so APLD is similar to like the ASID for interior designers or for ASLA, the Association of Landscape Architects. So to become a landscape designer, there are no credentials. You have to have some schooling or you have to have experience. So you have to, and there are many different levels, but you pay a membership fee. And then if you live in San Diego, you become a member of APLD San Diego. And I'm on the board of that organization. So we have our monthly board meetings. Right now they're via Zoom. And then we do programs generally once a month. But right now we're doing Zoom programs, and we've merged. Normally the programs are done by location because obviously I'm not going to drive to San Francisco to listen to somebody talk about a subject. But right now during the pandemic, all of California has come together and all of the meetings are done via Zoom. And so we're all sharing all of the programs, and they're usually bi-monthly. And the topics are very large, from irrigation to lighting to plant selection, all kinds of new. So we just had a one on what are the new plants that are going to be coming down in the next 2 years.
Great.
Hi, Jackie, it's Pam, and I wonder, we have a small yard in the back of our house which faces north, so it gets sun at this time of year, but it's pretty much in shade the rest of the year. Is it possible to have hydrangeas in that situation? And what would be the best vegetables we could grow?
So hydrangeas like shade. They like some morning sun. If they get stuck with the heat of afternoon sun, like from 12 to 3, I don't know exactly what time your sun hits. They don't really like hot, intense sun.
In the morning. Yeah.
So if you really want to grow them, what I usually tell people is buy one and try it. If it does well, then you'll know, rather than buying 6 or 8 or 10 of something, if it's really what you want to do. Because sometimes you find microclimates in people's gardens, and so what you think may not work works, or what you think will work doesn't work. So if it's something that you really want, just know that they like a lot of water, so don't put drought tolerant plants with them. And then the other question was
Vegetables, best ones to grow in that situation.
So if you want to email me particularly on that subject, so the greens, winter vegetables do well. Summer vegetables in general needs a minimum of 6 hours. Everything that fruits generally needs at least 6 to 8 hours of sun. I am Einstein's definition of insanity, because I continue to plant tomatoes outside I don't have my big garden anymore. I have a porch, and I plant them in pots, and I only get maybe 4 hours of sun, which is definitely against what you should be doing. And you know what? I get enough tomatoes that make me happy. Would I recommend that to you? No, but that's why I say try it and see how it goes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Anybody else have a question for Jackie? If so, she did give her contact information, so please make sure to contact Jackie in case you have additional
Anytime.
questions. Wonderful. Well, if nobody else has any questions, thank you all for joining us. Jackie, thank you so much for a wonderful
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. So everyone, if you want to learn more about the La Jolla Community Center and its upcoming programs, please visit our website, ljcommunitycenter.org. And once again, thank you, Jackie. Thank you all for joining us, and stay safe.
Thank you for joining me today. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.